The most glaring mistake from some of the smaller brands is not spending, which sounds pretty obvious, I guess. But as an agency with a ton of experience on Target, we'll get phone calls from brands of like, hey, we're launching next week or like 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whatever. Like, can you help us out? And then they're like, oh, we don't have any money.
Welcome to Unlocking Retail Media, the podcast where we explore the evolving world of retail media from data strategy to monetization and everything in between. This is where we break down how retailers can build smarter, data-driven media networks by aligning with what brands truly need, from scalable ad solutions and meaningful metrics to cross-channel attribution and programmatic strategy. Welcome to Unlocking Retail Media. My guest today is David Glaza, the founder and CEO of Digits Agency, one of the fastest growing retail media agencies in the country. Prior to founding Digits, David spent 14 years at Target and was one of the people who built Target Cartwheel, better known now as Target Circle, which is really the gold standard for retail loyalty and digital promotions. So he kind of knows what good looks like from the inside. Now through Digits, he's working with CPG brands, beverage alcohol brands, regional grocers to kind of make retail media work, not just in theory, but in terms of real sales and measurable results. And he's doing it across some of the most interesting and underserved parts of the ecosystem. You know, when you think about regional grocery, alcohol compliance, and then of course things like target activation and small format retail. We're going to get into all that, what brands are getting right and wrong, what regional grocers need to know, how measurement's evolving, and what David's seen from the inside that most people don't talk about. David, really glad to have you on. Thanks for making the time.
Great to be here, James. Thanks for having me.
So give us kind of the quick version of like what is Digits? What do you guys focus on?
Yeah, we are a retail media agency, and so we are obviously working a ton in, what people now call retail media, but we got our start about 10 years ago. I'd say before that term was coined. So essentially our job is to help brands and grocers in this space build, launch, run, and operate anything that kind of comes along with the retail media bucket.
Awesome. And you had, I think we had talked a little bit before this. It was interesting to me that I didn't know that you also are running retail media networks for a number of folks as well.
Correct. Yeah. We centralize operations for 6 regional grocers today. So grocers that are, I'd say 50 to 200 stores, kind of that general range. My team aggregates and runs that. So we are kind of adding to the fragmentation problem, at least from a points of retail media distribution point of view. So that is a kind of a common topic for us and our team. But
yeah, we'll come back. That's one of my favorite topics is the fragmentation sides. We'll come back to that. But quickly, kind of just a little bit more on your background. Like you were at Target for a while. You helped build, some of the early, before we all called it retail media. What kind of motivated you to kind of get out and start Digits?
At Target, my background is a merchant, so I'd say very focused on, pushing sales units, week to week volumes. And that's what always had really excited me there. When I got into the media spot, early days Roundel, I just was sort of astounded by how you could use digital tools to get people to physically get in their car and drive to stores and buy stuff. I just remember thinking that was super cool. Like there was one moment where we pushed like go on a push notification, and then like immediately the activity was like going up. And I was like, wow, that's so like immediate and cool. And then you can segment these by all these types of audiences and past purchase history. It just sort of motivated me because I would say a physical store merchant sort of getting exposed to e-com tools. I was just inspired to help figure out how to apply that to like the physical world. And I'd say 10, 14 years later, we're still figuring that out, right? Yeah. Like the way you use those types of tools for pure e-com sometimes just seems so easy. The way you use them for an omni-channel marketplace, trying to drive somebody to come physically into the store, it's just a different set of rules. And every day we're learning and figuring new ways to do it.
Yeah, that's a fun insight, right? Because I think in the pure digital world, it's so normal to say, oh, I run this ad on Instagram and people click on it and buy it, and I can see their click through and conversion rate. But you're kind of like, basically controlling people's actual behavior. They get in their car and drive to a store and then buy something and buy probably 3 other things and spend 30 minutes in there.
Yeah.
A push notification.
Yeah, it's so much. I mean, I would say it is harder to do retail media in a physical store because, yes, penetration rates these days at your Targets and Walmarts is like 25% for digital, but the other 75 are physically planning their trip for Saturday and they got to get in the car, drive there and remember it later. So it's just a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, especially like you mentioned the regional grocers earlier. I always think of regional. I think there was a regional grocer we were talking to recently that, it's like sub 3% e-commerce.
It can be low. Yeah. A lot of them are below 5% digital penetration, and then they'll get business still through like Instacart's marketplace. And so, but yeah, they're definitely playing catch up as far as penetration.
Yeah. But it's also, I think there's it's kind of in a way good for them, right? I always joke about like my local grocer. It's like, I still have never been to their website and I'm in the business, cause it's like, it's the one that's like on my way home. Right. And like, so you stop in and grab things. And so, we could get into in-store media later, but I think there's a lot of interesting, benefits to maybe not being as digital in some cases.
Well, I think a lot of them are trying to lean back into that localness, right? Like the Walmarts and Targets and Krogers have made it so easy to digitally order your grocers, and whether or not you're going to pick it up in your trunk in the parking lot or if they're literally going to come to your house, like that experience has changed so much, but it's also so much more generic, right? Like you don't know if the groceries showing up at your front door are from Walmart or Target or whatever. Like the experience is much more similar, but going to your local Schnucks or Coburn's or by me Kowalski's or Lund's, like it hopefully feels like your hometown and they're supporting your sports teams and, all that is just a different vibe that, is supposed to make you feel good and feel like neighborly. And so I think a lot more leaning into that even more as like trying to find that competitive advantage. So
yeah, if you go into there's a Lowe's here in North Carolina, not Lowe's Home Improvement, like Lowe's Grocery.
Yeah.
And if you happen to go in on like a Thursday night, like their bar is packed. Like they have like a tasting, like a microbrew tasting bar, but they have wine. They'll have like a musician. Like it's like you go in there, it's like a full bar. I'm like, this is a grocery store. Like I'm here to I got sent to the grocery store for like bananas and milk. And there's like a bar, hopping here on a Thursday night. But I do think it's great. It's like, it's making it another place people hang out. And then of course they grab something on the way home and add some value.
Yeah, well, you got to grab your pint of beer for your walk around the store.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like Whole Foods used to do that too. It's sort of like a vibe. But yeah.
Yeah. So you've so kind of getting in a little bit to like we'll start on the brand side. What do you see from, you work with a lot of these bigger brands that are spending across all these retailers. What are what are they doing? What are they doing right? Where do you think people are still making mistakes? Like what are the kind of, what are the best brands kind of doing right?
Yeah, I think best is a tough word there because where we work with brands big and small, I would say the big brands, their strengths are probably in their sophistication of, bringing media strategy to retail media. They've developed big centers of excellence to really bring it there. But I'd say my history being more on the merchant side, I'd say I tend to gravitate more towards the integration between like week to week sales and media. And that's where I'd say some of the highlights from a process POV that the little guys do really well is they're just so well connected. And, they're not necessarily building plans 6 months in the future. They're running their paid search on, in conjunction on a week to week basis with how well their sales are doing. They're dynamic and changing strategies all the time. They're being much more in tune with, I'd say, the next couple of weeks business dynamics versus like a set it and forget it strategy. So I think maybe to answer your question, what we're seeing is retail media grew up so fast that everybody built all these big teams and started spending a bunch of money and they've siloed it, right, to being like a really smart media people. And then now we're starting to see a gap between media teams and sales teams and how's this all this activity getting figured out? And that's kind of the next bucket to solve, I would say, is sort of this integration on a week to week, month to month drumbeat of retail of like, how are you actually going to execute retail media?
Yeah, it kind of leads into, I guess, the second question here is like, we talk a lot about, trade dollars, right? Or stuff that's like, already kind of earmarked for a retailer versus like brand or performance dollars. Do brands actually think of it that way? Or is that something that retailers like in their mind is happening?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, and not everybody does it the same way, but I do think, there's the true retail, not true, but like, pedestaled retail media where people are going to think of it more like brand dollars, right? And that's big tentpole events that are planned out in the future that are probably getting data off of TV buys and, much more of like very tops down. And so I think brands think of it that way. I do think kind of to the discussion of more like the drumbeat of retail, that part is still kind of getting built out. And like, is that more trade spend? Like, is paid search now actually trade spend because you're kind of buying digital shelf space similar to what you used to buy in-store shelf space? And so I think, that intersection is still getting figured out, but I would say I think they think of it that way. And then there's a whole big murky middle. Is kind of maybe the challenge, if you will.
And does it end up? I guess whether it's, I've heard some people say whether it's trade or not, it's kind of like, well, is it counting against the JBP? But then I've also heard of companies saying, well, we actually did a partnership with, name whatever platform where if they spend there with our data, it counts against the JBP. And so it's almost like trade is also encroaching on performance dollars in a different way. Like how do you think of, like when you guys are spending for a brand, like is that normally counting against a JBP?
It definitely is. Where Digits is retail media agency for brands, at least I'd say 90% of the money we're spending will flow into that retailer, right? Yeah. We will do some sort of like third party or social activations for us that doesn't necessarily generate VI. But that to your kind of point on does it hit a JBP is probably a pretty good rule of thumb, even though maybe not 100%, right? But there are sometimes we'll work with brands, on like a local level, and they'll say, hey, we're already satisfied our JBP. Like we were supposed to spend X and we spent X, but hey, we still got this money left over to do something. What can we do with it that maybe doesn't hit the JBP? Because I don't want that to, be anniversaried, or also my margin numbers look so great that I can't anniversary them. And so there's a bit of a song and dance that comes up there too. But yeah, most of it would flow in.
It's funny because that's like coming from the more traditional media world, like that's been the most alien part of the transition is like understanding the politics around JBPs, right? Like what you said of like, you think it would be a good thing of like, hey, this brand spent more than the JBP said, but you're right. Then then their anniversary comes up and they're like, well, you actually spent 20 million last year. So let's put that up by another 10%, right?
Yeah, that is the hard part. I think I don't have an answer here, but I wish there was a way to do both. I wish there was a way to like give credit for the media, as a merchant, let's say, without holding somebody accountable to that, forever and ever. Right. But, we all have numbers to hit. And so, yeah, if you make somebody's numbers look really good, they're going to want to have them look good again. Right. And so it's tough.
And you guys have a term like investment grade media. What is that?
Yeah, that's something we rolled out about a year or two ago, and really trying to elevate media to get those brand dollars. And so, that was born out of discussions that we'd had with a good number of sales leaders, and specific with a lot of the work we do around Target, where they felt like they weren't getting a fair share of their internal retail media budget, right? So, example, maybe they spend $5 million a year, but Target benchmarks them and says they should spend $8 million, right? And so they're going back every year to their headquarters trying to fund for money, and they just couldn't. And so we came up with this term, well, maybe they don't believe it's investment grade media. So what investment grade media at Target looks like, right? Then you're getting this reporting, you're getting these types of, placements, whatnot, right? There was a bit of a list that then a sales director can probably go back to his headquarters and fight with his VP of media and say, are these the three things we need to target to unlock more media budget? Because we know brands spend, a ton of media money. It's not all dedicated to retail media. And so the retail media bubble keeps getting bigger and bigger every year, I think soaking up more of it. And we wanted to arm our clients with, well, how do you fight for your share of your internal budget because that makes Target happy. It makes your life easier. Theoretically, it drives sales, which makes you look better, right? And so it turns them into rock stars if they're able to earn more dollars and make it work.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think we talk about that a lot with our customers of, that's how you're going to get what you're, owed in the JBP, right? But then how do you get more than that is really to show that this is as good as buying on Meta. It's, or better, right? It's better than the next best alternative. So I like the term investment grade media, but it's just kind of saying this media is actually going to pay off. It's not just, oh, Target says we should spend $3 million more.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's getting better and better, especially at the big boy retail media networks, right? Being able to give you the metrics and the KPIs that, your head of media as a brand wants to see, and your CFO, wants to see to feel good about their spend. And so I think that's something the big RMNs are really focused on. And to your point, to try to unlock and get a bigger share of the total media budgets that the brands are spending out there.
Yeah. So sticking on the brands for a little bit, I know you guys published a recap of Target's earnings, I think back for Q1. And you talked about some of the mistakes brands are making. What are the, I don't want you to recap the whole piece, but I'm curious, what are the mistakes you see brands kind of making, especially in regards to, spending on Target?
Not as much bigger brands, but I'd say the most glaring mistake from some of the smaller brands is not spending, which sounds pretty obvious, I guess. But as an agency with a ton of experience on Target, we'll get phone calls from brands of hey, we're launching next week or 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whatever. Can you help us out? And then they're oh, we don't have any money. And so I think that's a pretty obvious one. So I'll kind of just put that to the side of you need to be active these days. This is not 2010, right? You need to be running retail media. Otherwise, second one for me is tying back into that local sales team. I would say it's surprising to me how many directors of Target at CPGs say they have very little influence into the retail media. So it's run by a national team. It's not something that the salesperson is responsible for. So, sales teams are going to try to help their merchants hit objectives of, well, which brands need to win? Where do we fit in the planogram? Who are we competitive against? Maybe on a national level, certain brands not a priority, but at Target it is. And so allowing more local teams, I'd say, to direct and impact search spend, Roundel campaign spend, aligning campaigns to promotions and events that are important to a retailer. Those are things that I'd say when I'm talking to, again, sales directors, I'm surprised at how little influence that they have. Yeah,
it's interesting because it's kind of, I do think the prevailing practice now has been centralizing retail media, right? At a brand, and now even the brands agencies are getting involved sometimes, right? And it's so it's getting even further away from that local sales manager. But that kind of takes away from how trade dollars used to work, right? It was I'll work with you individual store to be let's do this end cap or let's do this promotion for the local, high school football championship or something. You lose that if it's all going through, somebody back at headquarters in New York.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll start to see some sort of bifurcation of it, right? Super national programmatic retail, with retail media data probably needs to be run by a national team that has deep media expertise, right? How to manage week to week media pulses that help manage promotions or an item just launched, or you just gained 300 doors at a retailer. So you want to put media around those doors. Those types of activities are not going to hit a national radar. And so that is a bit where we fit in, I'd say, for some of the local folks, is giving them a execution lever for some of those, more local activities, that, as you bifurcate sort of what's a national priority, what's a local priority. And this is where it all starts to sound like shopper marketing is what I would say.
Yeah.
The blurry line between shopper marketing and retail media exists anyway, but I almost think we'll have a renaissance of sorts of all right, well, how are we using all these new fancy tools to do, what maybe is a more traditional shopper marketing tactic, at least as a structure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Are there ways to have the guidance of the kind of national media experts, but the knowledge of the local, salesperson, right? Like, I think that's an interesting question. I have to think about how we would handle that. Maybe it's a new product idea.
Some sort of plus up, maybe like you can go into search, right, and do multipliers on line items and whatnot. Maybe the Target salesperson can say, all right, do a 20% lift in bids on these items at my office, right? Or whatever. I mean, that's a very tactical example, but maybe there's a way to do those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So that ties in well to thinking about the other side of the business that you all run, which is really working with these regional grocers and helping them operate. So, I think it's kind of, a lot of times I think it gets overlooked, right? Like we even talk about this sometimes where we're, if you're a major brand, right, you're in the US, you're going to say, okay, I've got Amazon, Walmart, Target, Albertsons, Kroger, you start to go down the list and then you're like, okay, like, number 10, right? I won't name any names, right? Let's say number 10 regional grocer out there.
Yeah.
It's like, they're not making the list, but they're huge, right? They're doing a ton of volume. So how do you, what's the playbook for a regional grocer, right? Like what's the success, for them?
Yeah. I mean, for us, and what we'll tell them when we work is, the retail media playbook is often a two-pronged ecosystem, meaning one, they need to pull in some sort of national feed. So, regional grocery, a lot of them have transitioned to Instacart, not exclusively, but like Instacart does a good job with Carrot Ads. You can plug Carrot Ads in on your site. You start making money passively as a regional grocer, right? And it's not local to you. It's not unique to you. It's not proprietary, but there's a check that's coming, and then it's not from your local JBPs either, right? So, but that's typically step one for regional grocers. The more exciting part, for us at least, is what we do, which is sort of like local managed service, where we're using, retail media tools to make easy tactics available to like the local CPG offices. So that's on-site media, it's off-site, it's often some sort of like, 360 catalog or events like we were talking about with the band at Lowe's. Like you're trying to bring those special things to life there. But the key is to make it all super easy for the CPGs, because typically we're working with the local sales team, not a media person. And they might be getting money from retail media, but they don't have a lot of operational executional support. And so, Digit specifically has to sort of solve a gap of, well, how do we get from A to Z without, asking the CPG to put 10 hours into this or even more, because if you ask them to, it won't happen. And we have to find a way to do it easy for everybody, but still drive results. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's kind of you're kind of their internal agency, right, for the retailer, and to say, hey, we'll also go basically be the agency for that local brand or local representative of a big brand to spend. Like, makes total sense.
100%. I mean, we're building creatives, we're creating taglines, we're helping to figure out what promotions to run. Some of them got it all figured out. I would say others need more help. It kind of depends on how they've been trained, I'd say, on retail media or just, digital tactics.
Are you doing any, like we talked about the fragmentation earlier, like, are you doing any aggregation, like giving a national brand the ability to buy across like 5 or 6 different regional grocers?
We do. Yeah, we do. I would say that's probably more, to be frank, our next phase, as we've been building scale. Like when we had 2 grocers, no CPG cared. And then, when we had 5, right, at 7, like what's the right number for that sort of unlock? I think today we're able to do campaigns pretty consistently, meaning like if somebody wants to run a holiday campaign, great, we can run the same holiday campaign across a couple of different regionals and make it easy as possible for them. I think we as a industry need to find the right way to do that, because we haven't really found brands budget that way yet, right? Like to your analogy, they budget for the top 10 maybe, and then they sort of just have like an all other. And having a random collection of 7 regional grocers, that's not like a line item yet on their budget. And so even when we do it aggregately, we're kind of piecing together local budgets. But every year it gets easier is what I would say, right? Like every year we get in budget strategy with these CPGs and they figure out another way to kind of bucket for regionals.
Yeah. Well, and at some point, like you get enough regionals together, you could be the size of an Albertsons or Kroger, right? Like it is amazing how diverse like grocery still is in the United States.
Yeah. From a store count for sure. I mean, it only takes 10 regional grocers, maybe 15 regional grocers. We're about half the way there. So yeah, it's getting there. Yeah, which is good.
And we talked earlier about like how, I mean, a lot of the regional groceries, I think especially have the kind of lower digital penetration. Do you do in-store as well?
We do, yeah, in-store and a lot of off-site. So I'd say I'll double up that we do tactics that are meant to drive in-store physical business, right? Not just e-com business. In-store is growing through, I know Grocery TV does a lot of things in this space. There's like Quad that's putting more inventory, if you want to think of it that way, in space, because most of these regional grocers historically haven't had a lot of like infrastructure for ads in store, but that's been a turning. And I'd say digits, we would take that on just like anything else, right? Like our business model is more to be like the one-stop shop agency for a CPG to execute within that grocer, whether that's, let's say, if that is in-store ads, if that's in-store radio, if that's TV, if it's circular placements, whatnot. We're trying to aggregate all of that as essentially the agency for the regionals.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's a ton of opportunity there. Like we talk to regionals every once in a while, and I think for us, it's normally we tend to work with retailers that are large enough that they really want to, build the investment, right, and go and hire the team and run in-house sales and kind of, take that, kind of get away from getting the check and get to, we're owning this. But I think for a lot of regionals, it's like it doesn't make sense for them to do that yet. Right. Like the digital is not big enough. And there's all these other reasons where I think there's a strong aggregation play.
Yeah. It's not easy necessarily to build a retail media team in X town where the regional grocer is. And, staffing wise, how many people are they really going to want to afford to staff? Right. And can they get people that have done it before and know what they're doing? I think some regionals try to do it themselves, or at least go down a path of doing it themselves. And then are like, I don't know if I want to commit that much to headcount, right?
Yeah.
Like, how about we just find somebody that can do it for us, and there's no operational overhead or burden or whatnot, and it's just a lot more turnkey. So
yeah, 100%. All right, last thing to kind of talk about, because I think it's fascinating, is the space of alcohol retail media, right? And you hear about this every once in a while. I think we talked before, like we work with a couple of companies in this space, but there's a lot of there's house laws, there's platform restrictions, there's lots of kind of things like compliance and things like that. Like I think this is something you guys have tackled though, right?
Yeah, we're definitely in the space where the term would be a leading United States alcohol retail media agency. But yeah, last year we worked with over 50 brands kind of in this space. And so Digits got involved around 6 years ago. As some of our regional grocers, I think, have a specialty in alcohol and sort of pushed us to, I think, help figure out the space. But the landscape has changed so much that, if we were doing this podcast 5 years ago, I think we would have said you can't do much of anything.
Right.
Now, most of the major retailers have opened up first-party offsite. So you can use first-party offsite audiences in alcohol, just like you can in food. You get closed-loop reporting, you get audiences, and all that is available for us to bring to brands. The biggest gap is on-site. So most major retailers do not let you still do on-site, but the marketplaces do. So running a ton of, Instacart, Uber, DoorDash, GoPuff, that type of work. And so, not a lot of agencies, I'd say, have a specialty in what the rules or the regs, you can do it in this state, but not that state. And so that's where we've planted our flag. So Digits operates what we call the Cheers Network, which is just sort of a kitschy name for saying, we know how all this works. Like, we can bring your brand to life with the best first party tools, across the US, in the space.
And that is like an aggregation play, right? Like if I'm Smirnoff, I can come to you and buy a campaign and it'll run across, kind of as many different platforms as you can support, right?
Correct. Yep. We will run it across essentially like a retail network, right? So if you wanted to do a Q4 push, whether that's onsite, offsite, whatnot, we would build a campaign strategy across all of them. We're actually having lots of discussions with brands now about what it means to have an actual like alcohol agency of record in the space. Where I'd say 3 years ago, it was pretty transactional, where they're like, ooh, we heard Walmart just rolled out some tools. How do we do that? Right. Yeah. And now it's like, well, what does 12 months of programming look like? Like we were going to be much more always on, right? And what does that look like for the next couple of years? So like in that respect, it feels so much like food during COVID, where food had gone from digital business being like 2% of their business to then like, holy crap, we need to be live with retail media 52 weeks out of the year. And so then they all started building agencies and teams and whatnot. So I'd say we're kind of at that moment right now with alcohol, that it's going to look a lot different 5 years from now than it does today.
It makes sense. I think it's a huge opportunity. Like, we're kind of in the early days somewhat, I think, of the alcohol retail media. But I think, you guys are putting yourselves in a good position there.
Yeah. I mean, the alcohol brands spend a lot of money. It's traditionally been very top of funnel, mass media, sports sponsorships. And so, it's finding the right ways to spend that money smarter, closer to the point of purchase, track it for retail sales data. But, you have to wrap all that up with doing it in a compliant way that works with industry regs. But it's definitely moving lower funnel. And I think, the brands that are seeing the data are kind of excited to be exposed to that, in the space.
Yeah. And it's also, I think those regs, I mean, in North Carolina here, right? It's like what used to be, you couldn't buy anything before like noon on Sunday. And then it was like, now you can buy something before you can't buy something before 10, but you can buy some things between 10 and 12. So it's like, it's not just it's not just like these national regulations you're keeping up with, right? It's like state per state level of what you're allowed to buy, when and where, and
Well, in Minnesota, you couldn't buy on Sunday up until a few years ago. They changed it. And then actually I moved here, after college, and I used to buy beer from like the gas station, because in Wisconsin, you could buy beer anywhere. Yeah. Little did I know that I was buying like NA beer, because you can't sell normal alcohol beer at a gas station. And that may have changed now too. But the state by state rules are all funky. So
yeah, it's like, like here we're like a state controlled liquor state. So like the only, it's just like the ABC stores where you can buy liquor. Yeah. And I remember the first time I walked into a grocery store in like California, and I'm like, there's just like Johnny Walker, like next to like the Doritos aisle. And then it's like the whiskey aisle. Pairing. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, this is crazy. So yeah, it's definitely it's not anybody out there thinking it's a, simple set of regulations. It's basically 50X, whatever you're thinking, because every state. And
there's a ton of industry vets in this space, right, that have made careers out of, doing, working for brands, right, and understanding this market. And so you're starting to infuse that group with maybe somebody that used to be in retail media at Kraft, and then they're coming over to, run something in a Diageo or an Anheuser-Busch, and they're like, oh, that's what I used to be able to do. Like, I can't do that here. What? Yeah. And then now you're like, oh, you can do half of it. And they're like, ooh, okay, good. Like, I'll start to do half
but
of
not
it.
on Sunday. No, yeah. So last question for you. You've been doing this for a while. What do you think's coming up? Like, what's next for, what do you see over the next 5 years for retail media? Like, what do you think is going to change, and where's the industry going?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what I talked about as far as, structurally, I do think you're going to see more control of the dollars and tactics flow to some of the retail, like the individual retailer people, like at the CPG and brand. How that happens, I don't know, because your comment on like, is it all still managed by like a central hub? I think essentially we're going to kind of see both, which maybe that's a conflict of ideas, but things are going to be more centrally managed through like a consistent data set and theme. Today you have search that's usually managed through one tool. You have offsite that's maybe managed through more of a trade desk DSP type thing. The more that those can integrate, the better. And then I think you'll still have to build in some sort of controls for the local guys. Yeah. So that's, I don't know if that gives you a straight answer, but as budgets grow, I think both of those two things will have to grow to sort of facilitate along with it. Tactics wise, I am excited to see where like CTV goes, is what I would say. There's, that, and that's the sort of, online video or TikTok video shopping aspect. That's super interesting to me. How that's going to impact your Walmarts and Targets and Krogers of the world, I'm not sure yet, but you can see the pure e-com play is really moving towards short-term video and like live shopping. So, somehow we're going to figure out how to use that type of stuff to push business at a Target and a Walmart, but I don't know if that's happened yet. But that's probably the next, bucket from a channel side that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I've seen that with like definitely some. I know Dollar General does some interesting stuff with influencers and kind of the shorter videos, like influencer driven kind of marketing. But I also heard a fascinating stat the other day from somebody who does a lot of like TikTok shop like commerce, which is that for every sale you actually make on the TikTok shop, it's something like you'll make 2x other places.
Yeah.
And actually,
that doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Like seen this before where it's like, I'll see something on like Instagram or TikTok. And then I'm like, I'm not buying it from here. Like, and I just go search for it on Amazon, right? And order it from Amazon. And so it's like, there's like this definite like spillover that's happening where I think everybody looks at TikTok shop as like really successful. But I think also it's the ROAS there is being driven like 2/3 like off of TikTok.
Yeah, literally happened to me this morning, actually. I saw a brand on TikTok. It was like a pillow that I needed to buy, and I didn't click buy. I went to Amazon, bought it there. So
yeah. So I think that's like we're part of the 60% or whatever.
Soon, I'm sure they'll find a way to measure it soon, right? Whether it's a partnership or credit card data, whatever, right? Like they'll figure out some sort of way to measure that, because you're right. The actual reported ROI on it is probably not as good as the real ROI, and it's up to agencies, I'd say, like us, to kind of track that and measure that. And even as simple as just like pulling your weekly Amazon sales and be like, look, you did a spike on TikTok and your Amazon then happened to go up at the same time. Wow, what a surprise, right? Like sometimes it's I call that merchant math. That's like very Excel based, both numbers moved in the same direction. But I think, you'll see that, and then they'll build better measurement tools over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, this has been awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Great to chat. Thanks for all the questions. And it's been fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Unlocking Retail Media. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share this show with your network. We'll be back soon with more insights to help you navigate the future of retail media. See you next time.